Welcome back to Who Shot JFK. Today we're doing something a little different. We're taking a deep dive into a really fascinating piece of JFK history. Penn Jones Jr.'s Forgive My Grief. It's this 4-volume series.
This isn't just your typical, conspiracy theory book, though.
Right.
Jones was a respected journalist.
Yeah.
He was the editor of a newspaper, the Midlothian, Texas newspaper, and he spent years, really meticulously investigating the assassination.
Yeah.
And these books are like the culmination of all of that work.
He really went, way beyond what the Warren Commission concluded.
Right.
He dug into all these witness testimonies and found all these inconsistencies.
Yeah.
It really raises some doubts about what, the official story is.
Yeah, exactly. He wasn't afraid to, challenge that accepted story.
Right.
And his findings have, fueled all these alternative theories about the assassination for, decades now.
It's crazy.
Ah.
So for our deep dive today, we're going to explore some of the most, I think, intriguing and unsettling details from Forgive My Grief. Think of it as a crash course in the world of JFK conspiracy theories, but all guided by, the research of Penn Jones Jr.
What I find most interesting is that Jones doesn't just, present these theories.
Right.
He really documents everything meticulously.
Yeah.
He presents evidence, he analyzes all these testimonies, and he shows you all the inconsistencies and just kind of lays it out for the reader.
Yeah. And one of the most chilling things he reveals is this pattern of deaths surrounding the assassination. And we're not talking natural causes here. These are suspicious deaths.
Yeah.
The kind that make you wonder if someone was trying to silence witnesses.
It's like this dark cloud, right, hanging over the assassination. The sense that, maybe people who knew too much or were getting close to the truth ended up dead.
It's spooky. Like, for instance, Jones talks about this guy, Bill Hunter, a journalist,
Right.
who was covering the assassination for a California paper.
Yeah.
And he's found dead in a police station,
No.
shot by a police officer.
Wow.
And officially, they said it was an accidental discharge.
Okay.
But the bullet trajectory just doesn't add up. And get this, Hunter had been investigating Jack Ruby's connections.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty suspicious, especially, when you think about all the other deaths surrounding this case. You have Tom Howard, who was one of the lawyers that Hunter had actually written about.
Yeah.
He died of a supposed heart attack not long after the assassination.
Oh, wow.
But here's the thing. His friends said that he was acting really strange in the days leading up to his death.
Really?
Yeah, and they never did an autopsy.
That's weird.
Right. Why not be transparent? That's what I don't get. This kind of lack of transparency keeps coming up again and again. Makes you wonder what they're hiding.
Makes you wonder. And then there's this other guy, Jim Kuthi.
Yeah.
He was a photographer who took pictures of Ruby at his nightclub.
Oh, yeah, the Carousel Club.
The Carousel Club. And he died in a car accident. But guess what? The other driver was never identified.
That's odd.
And then there's Hank Killam, the husband of Wanda Joyce Killam, who worked for Ruby. And his death is also kind of shrouded in mystery. And Jones kind of implies that there's this direct connection between Killam's deaths and his wife's, connection to Ruby.
It's too much of a coincidence, isn't it?
It is a lot of coincidences. Almost like someone was trying to just clean up all the loose ends.
That's what Jones thinks. It wasn't just these isolated incidents. He thinks there was this effort to keep people quiet.
Yeah.
And it's not just the deaths, it's these inconsistencies in people's testimonies and the missing evidence, all these unanswered questions. You really start to wonder if we're getting the whole story.
Yeah. And there's this really curious case of a guy named John Carter. He was a boarder at Oswald's former residence.
Okay.
And he was friends with Wanda Joyce Killam. But he claimed that he'd never even heard of Jack Ruby.
Wait a minute. I thought you said his friend worked for Ruby. So how does he not know who Ruby is? That's pretty hard to believe.
And the FBI and the Warren Commission, they don't give us much information about Carter.
It's almost like they didn't want to draw attention to him.
And Jones really digs into why someone who might have information about, Ruby and his connections was just overlooked.
Makes you wonder, right? Were they intentionally downplaying certain connections?
Yeah.
Or maybe some leads weren't followed because they might have led to something they didn't want people to know?
Exactly. And Jones gives all these examples of conflicting testimonies that were given to the Warren Commission.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are centered around Jack Ruby. He points out the differences between Ruby saying he didn't know Oswald.
Right.
And then all this evidence that suggests that they actually did know each other before.
It's interesting how Jones breaks down Ruby's testimony. He really digs into what he's saying and how he's saying it. And he points out these, like, strange figures who were present, like William F. Alexander. He was the assistant district attorney. And he seemed more worried about protecting Ruby than actually getting to the truth.
Yeah. And there's this one point where Ruby practically begs to be taken to Washington.
Right.
And he says he has information that he can't reveal in Dallas.
It's like he knew something, right, that could change everything. But someone wanted to keep him quiet.
Yeah. And Jones, he really documents these attempts to silence Ruby. It's like a movie.
It really is. And, it's important to remember that Jones isn't just doing this to be sensational, you know?
Right.
He's using evidence, and he's trying to get us to think critically about the story that we've been told.
Exactly. He does the same thing with the testimony of this Texas senator who was supposedly at a restaurant in Dallas when they announced that Oswald had been shot.
Oh, yeah, the one who said he was so surprised, right?
Yeah, surprised by the news. But then later, he admits that there weren't even any radios at the restaurant.
So how did he know?
Exactly. Like, how could he have known about the shooting before it was publicly announced?
Yeah.
It seems like a small thing, but it makes you wonder.
It makes you wonder about what he knew and if he was being honest.
And, Jones doesn't shy away from, taking on the Dallas Police Department and how they handle the investigation. He criticizes how they question Oswald.
Right. It was such a mess.
A mess. And that, bizarre show-up where Oswald wasn't even shielded from the press.
It could have jeopardized his right to a fair trial.
Yeah. And then the lack of security that led to Ruby even being able to shoot Oswald?
He really puts their competence into question. I mean, maybe even their motives, right?
Yeah. Jones even points out that Chief Curry admitted to security breakdowns, but then he implies that maybe they killed Oswald on purpose.
Wow, that's a pretty big statement coming from the chief of police.
It is. It makes you think there's more to the story than just, incompetence.
It really makes you question things, doesn't it? Especially when you consider that Jones goes back and looks at those deaths again. Bill Hunter and Jim Cothey, those journalists.
Right.
He digs into the details, and there are all these unanswered questions and inconsistencies with how they supposedly died. It's like a shadow hanging over the whole thing.
Yeah. It's almost like he's saying that their deaths were connected to them looking into the assassination. Like someone wanted to keep him quiet.
Right. And then there are all those coincidences that he keeps pointing out throughout the book.
Yeah, those coincidences.
And we're not talking about little everyday things, This is like a whole bunch of interconnected events, and a lot of them involve Ruby and Oswald. The chances of all that happening by chance are, super slim.
It's almost like he's saying, look, this is just too weird to ignore. There's got to be something else going on here.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
He's challenging us to question the official story, and to consider other possibilities. That's what makes Forgive My Grief so interesting. It's not about giving you a definitive answer. It's about taking all these details, all this research, and making you confront these unanswered questions. Like, what if the truth is way more complicated than what we've been told?
It's like he's given us this big puzzle box, but some of the pieces are missing and some don't even fit. And we're just left trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, that's it exactly. And that's why Jones's work is so powerful. It stays with you. It makes you think. And it encourages you to keep digging. Now, it's important to remember that Jones himself never claimed to have all the answers.
Right.
He was more like trying to pave the way for others to keep investigating, to follow the leads that he uncovered.
It's like he was saying, here's a ton of evidence that doesn't fit the official story. What are you going to do about it?
Exactly. And it's a question we're still dealing with today. Jones's work is still important because it shows us that we don't know everything about the JFK assassination, and we might never get a complete answer.
Yeah, one thing that really stuck with me was how Jones explored the idea that the police messed up big time, or maybe even covered stuff up in the JFK case.
Yeah, that's a theme that comes up a lot in his work. He really goes into the Dallas Police Department's actions, and he finds all these instances where they messed up or maybe even did things on purpose to sabotage the investigation.
Okay, like what?
Well, think about how they interrogated Oswald.
Yeah?
Jones points out that it was a total mess. People were coming in and out of the room.
Yeah, it was chaotic.
Exactly. They didn't follow any of the normal rules for interrogation. And these were experienced detectives. They should have known better.
Doesn't really make you feel confident in their investigation, does it?
Yeah.
You'd think they'd want to keep things controlled, especially in such a high-profile case.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's that show-up where they paraded Oswald in front of the press.
Oh, yeah.
No screen, nothing.
Like he was a sideshow or something.
Exactly. It was a media circus, and it probably hurt his chances of getting a fair trial.
It's almost like they were intentionally making him a target.
Yeah, Jones hints at that. He also questions why they cleaned and pressed Governor Connolly's suit before they gave it to the Warren Commission. That's like destroying important evidence.
Wait, are you saying someone messed with the evidence on purpose to hide something?
Jones doesn't say it outright, but he presents the facts, and lets you decide. And it's hard to ignore when you think about Chief Curry's testimony. He admitted there were security problems, but then he suggested that maybe killing Oswald was done intentionally.
Wow, that's crazy. The chief of police saying something like that. It's like nobody trusted anyone involved in this whole thing.
Exactly. And Jones gives concrete examples, like how casually they moved Oswald around, making it easy for Ruby to get to him.
It's like they were practically inviting someone to take him out.
That's kind of how it comes across in Jones's analysis. He doesn't say for sure why the police acted that way, but it raises a lot of questions about their competence, their motives, or maybe even both.
Man, this is getting intense. But Jones didn't just focus on the police, right? Didn't he have some pretty wild theories about who else might have been involved?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He went deep into all sorts of possibilities, from organized crime to the CIA, even the whole military-industrial complex. He was connecting the dots, linking together events and people that didn't seem related at first glance.
Okay, hold on. Let's unpack this. What were some of the most, out there theories he explored?
Well, he spent a good chunk of time looking into Jack Ruby's ties to organized crime. He found stuff that suggested Ruby was more than just a nightclub owner, that he had connections to some shady characters and might have been involved in some illegal business.
So you're saying Ruby wasn't just some heartbroken patriot who shot Oswald to avenge Kennedy?
Yeah, Jones paints a more complicated picture of Ruby. He suggests that his reasons for killing Oswald might have been way darker than that. Like, he points to how Ruby kept begging to be taken to Washington and saying he knew the truth. And then there was his lawyers trying to stop him from talking.
It's like Ruby was a walking time bomb of secrets, and someone was terrified of what he might say.
Exactly. And then there's the idea that the CIA might have been involved, maybe not directly, but in some way. Jones highlights how Oswald went to the Soviet Union, his possible connections to Cuban exiles, and that whole world of Cold War spy stuff.
Wait, hold on. Are we talking full-on conspiracy theories now? Did Jones really think the CIA was behind the whole thing?
He doesn't say that directly, but he does present evidence that maybe the CIA knew about a plan to kill Kennedy, or maybe they were part of a cover-up afterward.
This is like some serious spy movie stuff. What kind of evidence are we talking about?
Well, he talks about Oswald's trips to Mexico City, where he supposedly met with Cuban and Soviet agents. And there were all these people connected to intelligence agencies hanging around Dallas right before the assassination.
So you're saying Jones was trying to connect Oswald to this bigger network of international intrigue, like maybe he was just a pawn in a much bigger game.
That's one way to look at it. And it's important to remember that Jones wasn't doing all this in a vacuum. The 1960s were a crazy time,
Oh yeah, with the Vietnam War and all the social unrest.
Exactly. People didn't trust the government. And the JFK assassination became a symbol of all that suspicion and distrust.
So Jones was tapping into this deep-seated fear that the government was pulling the strings, both here and in other countries.
Right. And his work resonated with people who felt like the official story about JFK's death was too simple, too neat, like it couldn't possibly explain everything that happened in Dallas.
He was speaking for the people who doubted the government, the ones who felt like something just wasn't right, like the truth was being hidden from them.
And that's why Forgive My Grief is still so relevant today. It reminds us that history isn't always clear-cut. Sometimes it's messy, full of contradictions, and open to different interpretations. And sometimes the most important questions are the ones that don't have easy answers.
Okay, my head's spinning a little with all this talk about conspiracies and cover-ups. Let's focus on one specific thing Jones investigated. Tell me about that whole senator in the Eat Well restaurant thing. What was that all about?
Yeah, that's a good one. The senator who couldn't quite remember what happened. It's a perfect example of how Jones used these seemingly small inconsistencies in people's stories to raise bigger questions about whether we can trust what they're saying and if the investigation was really thorough.
All right, I'm hooked. Lay it on me.
So Jones says that this Texas senator was having breakfast at the Eat Well restaurant in Dallas when they announced that Oswald had been shot. And the senator supposedly said, "My God," like he was totally shocked.
Okay, sounds normal so far. What's the problem?
Well, later on, when the senator testified to the Warren Commission, he claimed that there weren't even any radios in the restaurant, so he couldn't have heard the news right away. But that contradicts how he reacted. If he was so surprised, it means he probably knew about the shooting before they announced it publicly.
Interesting. Was the senator lying? Did he know something was going to happen?
Jones doesn't jump to conclusions like that. He carefully looks at the senator's testimony, points out the things that don't add up, and asks why the senator might be so vague.
Like he's a detective, right? Studying every word, every pause, trying to find clues.
Exactly. And the clues here suggest that the senator might have been trying to distance himself from something. Maybe he overheard a conversation or got a phone call or just had a feeling something was going to happen that day.
Okay, but even if he did know something, does that automatically mean he was involved in a conspiracy?
Not necessarily, but it makes you wonder what he knew and why he wasn't straight with the Warren Commission. And it shows how important it is to pay attention to even the smallest details. They can lead to bigger discoveries.
It's like the truth is right there in front of us, waiting for someone to notice it.
That's it. That's what makes Jones's work so captivating. He was great at connecting the dots, taking all these little bits of information and weaving them into this big picture that challenged the official story and made people question what they thought they knew about the JFK assassination.
He was like a pioneer of alternative history, right?
Yeah.
He opened the door for other researchers to keep digging into the mysteries of that day in Dallas.
Absolutely. And what he did still matters today. His work reminds us that the search for the truth never really ends. It takes courage, persistence, and the willingness to question authority.
Speaking of question and authority, Jones really went into this idea of buddies that he thought were involved in either the assassination itself or the cover-up afterward. Not like a formal group, but more like a network of people with the same interests, loyalties, and who are willing to protect each other.
Yeah, that's right. And these buddies could be anyone, like cops, politicians, even people from the criminal underworld. Jones doesn't give us a list of names, but he implies that these people operated in secret, doing favors, keeping secrets, and putting loyalty above justice.
It's kind of scary to think about, right? Like a secret network that can do whatever they want without any consequences. Makes you wonder how many people knew something about the assassination, but kept quiet.
And Jones illustrates this with the story of Roger Craig, a deputy sheriff in Dallas. Craig said he saw Oswald running away from the Texas school book depository right after the shooting, but the Warren Commission dismissed his testimony.
They didn't believe him.
Not at first. But Jones found evidence that supported Craig's story and showed that Craig was pressured by his bosses to change his story.
So instead of being a hero for potentially identifying the assassin, they tried to shut him up.
Yeah, pretty much. And you see this happening over and over in Jones's work. He finds all these people who, for different reasons, chose to keep quiet or change their stories to match the official version of what happened.
Like there was this, I don't know, unspoken rule among the people who knew what really went down. Like telling the truth would be worse than just letting the lie continue.
Right. And that's the really sad part of Forgive My Grief. Jones shows us a system where the truth doesn't matter as much as protecting powerful people, where they'd rather cover things up than get justice for a president who was murdered. It makes you wonder, could this happen again?
Yeah, it's a scary thought. It reminds us that we can't just believe everything we hear, especially from people in charge. We got to think for ourselves and question things.
Exactly. Jones wants us to be more than just passive citizens, you know? He wants us to be active, to demand transparency, and to hold those in power accountable.
Like he's saying, don't just sit there, do something.
Exactly. Maybe if we embrace that spirit of questioning things, if we refuse to just accept the official story, then maybe we can finally let go of the grief and get a little closer to understanding what really happened.
So after going through all of this with Forgive My Grief, where do we stand? I gotta admit, it's a lot to take in. Jones paints a pretty dark and confusing picture of what happened around the JFK assassination. And he challenges the official story every step of the way.
Yeah, and remember, Jones never said he had all the answers. He saw his work as a starting point, something to get people thinking and to encourage more investigation into the assassination.
Like he was shining a light into the shadows, saying, hey, look closer. Ask questions. Don't just accept what they're telling you.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message. Jones's work reminds us that finding the truth takes time and effort. It takes courage to stand up and say, wait a minute, something ain't right here.
So what do you think? After exploring Forgive My Grief with us, do you feel like you understand the JFK assassination a little better now? Are you okay with the official story? Or do you, like Penn Jones Jr., believe there's more to it than we've been told?
We encourage you to check out Jones's books, look at the evidence he presents, and come to your own conclusions. As they say, the truth is out there. It's up to us to find it.